webinar. I'm Ivo Klee, I work for POLIS, and we are a partner in the Sunrise project, a project that has teamed up with three other projects, Looper, Metamorphosis, and Cities for People, to bring an interesting webinar together to discuss the role of neighborhoods in a process towards sustainable urban mobility. And you'll be with us for the next 3 hours, or at least that's what we hope. This webinar is part of a series of activities we have organized with POLIS called Mobilising Mobility, where we try to turn European transport innovation as it is happening in European research projects into local action. And this is part of a series. You see the other topics that are addressed in the next weeks and that have been addressed in the past weeks, and all that information also is coming together online. So a couple of practical issues. The webinar will be recorded and that recording will also be shared later. We do ask you to turn off the mic. Okay, do you hear me? Because there was something with the settings.
Yes,
and now we can hear you again.
Okay, good. Yeah, there was an Deus ex machina that tampered with my microphone, but it's solved. So we would like you to mute your microphones and turn off your cameras. These can reappear the moment we start the interactive discussions. But for now, during the first introductions, please, let's keep the environment as quiet as possible. And you can use the chat for discussions. The chat is also visible for the speakers, for the moderator, Meia, who can help answer your questions. So I am just a small shrimp in a much richer banquet that is offered to you in the afternoon. But having been also at the design table of the Sunrise project, and having been involved in the interaction between the projects as well in the past years and in Sunrise, I think I want to give a couple of messages observing the neighborhood dimension of SUMPs. We are in these projects because we are convinced that bringing in the neighborhood actually makes SUMPs much better. The sustainable mobility planning process might be conceived as something top-down of an godly figure that is sitting at a desk in a city hall and is writing a plan that affects all, and that is then implemented from the management downwards. There are also, of course, bottom-up processes happening in cities. Citizens who organize themselves, grassroots issues. But I think with the processes that we have been managing in the projects, we have found some kind of a middle way that also enriches the entire SUMP approach. And the image I want to bring is that of an archipelago where we create sustainable islands in the city, the neighborhoods, that interact with each other, that become networks of spaces, and that make it possible for entire cities to change, also be an example for other places in the city to change, and also that create a better granularity for the SUMP to thrive and to have impact. A second observation I have, and it won't be long, I will stop talking then, is that so much happened the last 5 years. I've been checking, and we started preparing these projects, all of us. For Looper, I'm not so sure, but we started in autumn 2015, when we were preparing the first stage of these projects, and these 5 years have been intense. Also looking at what existed or what didn't exist. This is an image that is used by the JPI Urban Europe to illustrate their call for energy positive districts. And when we started talking about Sunrise or cities for people, etc., energy positive districts were basically people trying to put solar panels on buildings. And 5 years later, the notion of an energy positive district is much richer. It includes all kinds of services, including mobility services, including shared mobility, vehicle to grid functionalities, next to other sectoral issues. But the concept has moved on a lot, and it's also a big thing in a smart city context. There have been evolutions like neighborhood apps. This is Hoppler, an app that I'm using for my neighborhood. There is localized micro mobility in a shared form with on your slide and a program from the Flemish region, which has the plan to deploy at least 1,200 shared mobility locations across the region, bringing together in a physical but also in a digital way neighborhood mobility services that can help people to move in their environment. And then last but not least, I think a notion that has won elections in the last year, the notion of the 15-minute city, a concept that was around in some people's minds in papers of planners as a concept, now is the talk of the town or the talk of the city around Europe or even around the world. What's funny is that in the UK they call it 20-minute city, so I'm not sure where they spent these additional 5 minutes on, or whether it's a metric towards empirical measurement system that has gone wrong. But anyway, so we are living in a world full ideas, and I think the 4 projects that we have seen contribute to that. And you can also contribute to the discussion. Please share your thoughts on social media. You find the Twitter accounts here on the screen, and I guess you will also, if you keep an eye on your phone, you might see the discussion happen there as well as in this online meeting. So that's it from my side. We continue the discussion anyway at the POLIS conference, where we also have neighborhoods projects present. And then I give the floor to Meia, who will do a much better job than me introducing the projects and sharing the afternoon. Meia, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Welcome everybody at the Neighbourhood conference. That's the short word for our conference. In full, it's called Towards Sustainable Urban Mobility, One Neighbourhood at a Time. I see that we have 90 people here, so that's a very nice group of people that are interested in this conference. Of course, ideally we would have done this face-to-face in a real space with each other, discussing and being able to discuss all the things that we learned over the last 3 to 4 years. But of course, this is the next best thing, and we're able to share our results from these projects. So just a short introduction from my background. My name is Meia Wippoo. I'm in charge of the co-creation lab at Waag in the Netherlands, and I was involved in 2 of the neighborhood projects in the last few years. And a year ago, we had a first meeting of these then 3 projects, but now it's 4 projects. And we realized that there are so many things that we learned in each of these projects that is validated by the work in the other projects. So we thought to join forces and create one big conference. So welcome, and hopefully we'll go enjoy our 3 hours together. As you've seen, you all had to register for a breakout session as well. That's because we are very eager to really work with everybody that is joining the conference and sort of hear feedback and insights from other people outside of our projects. So we have 5 breakout rooms that will be moderated by our colleagues from each of the projects. And we very much encourage you at that point to share your camera, to speak up and be very engaging with each other. And at that point, we will be also working with a Miro board. So most of you, or some of you might have already worked with the Miro board. It's one of the things that we're all now introduced in the last few months to start working together. It's one of the whiteboard systems. And the moderators of the breakout sessions will be working in that Miro board. Should you want to have access to the board to just view it, you can ask your breakout moderator at that point. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what we are going to do this day, of this afternoon. So I will share my screen very quickly. And I will, whoop. So let's see. Is everybody able to see my agenda right now? Is that a
yes?
Yes. In previous ones, it wouldn't work. So what we're going to do, obviously, I will do a small introduction. That's what I'm doing right now. But in a minute, we invite Andrea Arcelli from INEA to do a short talk about co-creation at the neighborhood level, a challenging change. Andrea is the project officer for 2 of our projects involved in the project in this conference. So it's a good sort of overview and good to see that insight. After that, we will be I will be interviewing our 4 project coordinators on sort of the biggest lessons learned. Also, not all the projects we have a shared interest and a shared topic, of course, with these 4 projects, but every project has a different approach and a different focus point. So it's good to see for you all to what the differences are between these projects, and also what the overlapping results are, since we are sharing our results together. So we will do a short interview with these 4 people. And after that, we're going to do this so-called big messages breakout session. So after this 3 to 4 years that we've been working in these projects, of course, we had the big insights, and we found out that there's so much overlap between the projects, and it's sort of a shared outcome. So these are sort of the validated big messages that we would sort of take to the next steps and next stages of working in mobility, working in city planning, and working in co-creation. Just to make things a little bit easier, we merged 2 of the big messages into one session. So that's why we have 5 sessions. But ideally, we would be discussing all the big messages in the breakout sessions. So feel free to speak up, share your thoughts in the breakout sessions. Should you have not registered for a breakout session, please hang back, because then we will identify what you're interested in most, and then we will assign you to those groups. So level the playing field and invest in citizen participation will be hosted by Looper coordinator Imre. The benefits of the neighborhood level and participation in education will be hosted by Kristen from the Sunrise Project. Ensure diversity, inclusivity, and allow experiment in community will be hosted by Susanna from the Metamorphosis project. Look at the big picture and be where the people are will be hosted by Graham from the Cities for People project. And manage expectations and evaluate and value the interpersonal and social results will be moderated by Joe from the Looper project as well. We already know that number 2 and 3 are very full. So if you are interested in one of the other ones, they're also very full, but a little less full. So should you not have been assigned to one of the sessions, a preference would be that you choose either 1, 4, or 5. But let's just see how things go. All right, and then after we come back from the breakout, it's a very strict breakout, so you will be kicked out of your breakout room and reverted back to the general sessions, and we'll go over the conclusions and takeaways with these moderators. And feel free to add comments in the chat by that point if you want to participate in that discussion as well. So we try to be as co-creative as possible in any way an online session is able to do that. And then after that, we invite Luana Bidaska from DJ Move to do a short talk on the future for neighborhood mobility. And then we wrap things up and look at the next steps. And hopefully we all learn a little bit more at the end of the conference. So far, let's see if there are any questions. So like Ivo said, please, if you have any issues or things or very pressing questions, please use the chat function. I will check those regularly. So if you feel that you need to add something to the conversation, don't feel shy, and you're welcome to join us in that sense. Yeah, let's see. No very pressing questions. Let's see if I missed something. Yes, one thing for everybody, just to facilitate the breakout sessions, make sure that your full name is visible in your underneath your screen, or it's your screen name, so that the people assigning the breakout rooms can make sure that you are indeed in the right room. Some names are very common and some are not. So make sure that you write your full name, ideally even your organization, so that it's easier for the people distributing people over the breakout rooms to find you. Okay, let's see. I think that's it for this part. I want to check if Andrea is in the house so that I can give
I'm here, Meia. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
I don't know if the feed is working anyway. Let me check. Should. Yeah, she's here. Can you see me? Can you hear me? That's
yes, both are working.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Meia, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation, of course. Very happy to be here today. So my name is Andrea Arcelli. I'm working as a project officer at INEA, and I'm also the project officer of 2 of these projects that we'll present today. So it's Sunrise and Metamorphosis. I know, of course, about Cities for People. Looper is quite new, but I had the time to read something about it. It's very interesting that we have Looper as well today involved. So again, very happy also because I think this discussion that we are having today has started at least 1 year ago when we had the first cluster event in INEA, where the 4 projects from Horizon 2020 came together and started to discuss about intermediate results, different approaches to co-creation, and of course, I mean, difference with the stakeholders that they were involving and so on. And then the discussion went on throughout the year, of course, remotely, unlikely. And then remotely as well 1 month ago, during the Urban Mobility Days, we had the chance to speak again and see what were almost the final result. Of course, the 3 out of 4 of this project are finished now. Sunrise is still some months to go, but I think more or less they already know what are the results at this point. And of course, I mean, there was some main point that we took out from this discussion. We know that at the beginning there was some confusion. I mean, what is co-creation? What is co-creation? At the beginning, people say, okay, it's the usual bottom-up approach. But it was quite clear from the first activity that the co-creation is completely different from the bottom-up approach as it was intended in the past, so where citizens, were involved, but were involved in specific phases of the creation of a measure. It was maybe the demonstration, sometimes with the initial design. But with the co-creation, we really learned that these citizens are involved from the very beginning to the very end of the process. On top of this, of course, these 4 projects have also capitalized on the neighborhood dimension. The neighborhood, of course, is a way to leverage on the sense of community of a specific area, on specificities, mobility specific features of a given area. And this is also, of course, if you are successful at neighborhood, then you have a good starting point also to scale up to the city level and beyond. Of course, I mean, again, this discussion was long. Sometimes was different. Every site has different results, but of course there was a common line and some common points that for me are very interesting, and that of course I think there will be the chance today to speak a little bit more, because of course in the past, either because there was only intermediate result or because there was no time, like for instance during the session at the Urban Mobility Days. 3 points that for me are very interesting. One is that, of course, the co-creation is not something that you can take as it is and deploy wherever. So it's something, it's a methodology, but then there is quite some effort to customize the methodology and make it effective for your sites. So there is a prior investment that you must consider. Second, it's clear that the co-creation at the neighborhood level increase the ownership of results by the citizens. But of course, is a process that is demanding also in the management. Is a long process to keep the people interested and involved. It needs a lot of effort also from the side of the organizer. So this is another thing that must be taken into account. And third is that, of course, you ask for higher involvement, and then this is really leading to increase the expectation of these people, of the citizens. But you must be realistic in the approach. So, I mean, you cannot promise whatever at the beginning, because at a certain point you have to anyway make your calculation with the reality. That is money, this is policy dimension, this is priorities, and so on and so forth. So, again, I don't want to spoil too much time for today, because I really think these are the points that will come back during the discussion. I'm really looking forward to hear about this, and maybe we will have more time to speak at the end. So thank you very much, Meia. I can pass the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Yes, so I would like to invite our 3 coordinators of 4 coordinators of the project to share their camera. I think that's the easiest thing, so that everybody can introduce themselves. So Christine Tovas, would you like to come to the floor representing Sunrise? Isabel Ruiz, Cities for People, Carl Reiter, Metamorphosis, and Imre Kesru from Looper. Could you start sharing your face? All right, so welcome. I thought it would be good to do a quick introduction about the projects that you all 4 represent, because of course there's like I said, an overlap, but there's also some unique qualities from each of the projects that sort of gives a certain color to what we're discussing. So I'm just going by the order that I am seeing you guys in. So Carl, would you like to give sort of a short introduction of what Metamorphosis is as a project?
Yeah, thank you, Meia. Hello, I'm Karl Reiter from Austrian Mobility Research. We are the coordinators of the Metamorphosis project. Our project had the focus on the involvement of children in the whole transformation process of street space and of mobility behavior from the beginning on. So to use the help of children as radical questioners for the analysis phase and for the implementation, to use the emotion of children to make the implementations more better working, and also in the evaluation, because the children are honest feedback providers without whitewash. And this is very important. And they have direct access to the hearts of their parents, grandparents, families, and friends, though they are really good influencers when it comes to make the picture bigger. And they are storytellers and peer multiplicators. Though this was the main focus of our project, to involve children at all stages and to make things happen. And it was very successful.
All right. Thank you, Carl. Kristen, could you tell us a little bit about Sunrise?
Sure. Yeah. So thanks, Meia. Just to give you a bit of background, my name is Kristen Tovas. I'm with Ruprecht Consult, and together with my colleague Ralph Brandt, who's also joining us today, as well as Hannah Peters, we're coordinating Sunrise. It's a 4-year project. So for the past 3.5 years at this point, we've been working together with 6 action neighborhoods across Europe. And these come from Jerusalem, Budapest, Southend in the UK, Bremen, Thessaloniki, and there's always one that I am missing out on. Yeah, we had Budapest as well. So yeah, and so we've been going through a process of co-creation across the 4 stages of Malmö. I'm sorry, Malmö. It's been a long day. Malmö in Sweden as well. We've been going through these 4 phases of co-creation with these 6 action neighborhoods. They have developed co-creation fora with representatives from the local businesses, residents, community organizations, and to co-identify problems and validate the needs of the residents, as well as co-develop and select solutions together with them, and co-implement these solutions, as well as co-evaluate both quantitatively and qualitatively. So we're coming up on almost the end of our project. Hopefully in July next year, we will have even more results than what I'll be able to speak about today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Imre, could you share us a little bit about what the Looper project is?
Sure. So my name is Imre Keşeri from the Free University of Brussels, from the Mobi Research Center, and we are coordinating still for a couple of days because the project is ending at the end of October, the Looper project. Looper stands for Learning Loops in the Public Realm. And in a way, it's a bit the odd one out of these 4 projects, because we've been funded by JPI Urban Europe and the local funding agencies. But probably that's the only thing we are odd one out, because we also address very similar problems and issues that the other 3 projects. Our focus was, beside the use of data and new digital tools, on the human side of co-creation, and how we can foster learning across the different participants of co-creation. Also, we looked a little bit beyond mobility. We had a couple of living labs which focus on traffic safety, for example, and improving in general their neighborhoods, but also we looked at green space and security issues to demonstrate that this approach also works beyond the mobility domain. We tested this learning loop model in 3 living labs in Manchester, Verona, and Brussels. And one of the specific things that we looked at is how we can go beyond the first cycle of co-creation. So after implementation and monitoring, how can we actually learn from this whole process and do the next cycle much better than in the first stage?
All right, thank you. And then Isabel, could you tell us a little bit about Cities for People?
Yes, thank you, Meia, for the introduction. So again, and thank you all for presenting so far. As Meia said, like I'm Isabel Froes, and I'm a postdoc here at Copenhagen Business School, where together with my colleague, Julie Nugo, we are coordinating the Cities for People project. As the other projects, this Cities for People is a research and innovation project. So we're looking at different aspects, both researching and developing solutions, and as well like analyzing the results and evaluating the results and the impact of these solutions in the cities. Cities for People were the consortium, like we had the cities of Budapest, Hamburg, Trikla, Istanbul, and Oxford, very different cities. But as the project made use of people-oriented transport and mobility framework and methodology, it was about bringing like the 4 groups of both businesses, the citizens, the city, the authorities, and the universities and the researchers as well, to understand and to learn about each other's perspectives, but also together both uncover the problems, but also together develop the solutions that were both tried out, piloted, and implemented and scaled up in these locations. We were a 3-year project, and we are literally, again, just as many of the others, just finishing. We're running until the end of November. So just wrapping up, and again, very successful outcomes, as many of the scale-up solutions actually became permanent in many of the cities, in many of these locations, or are even further scaled up. So this is like even beyond our like dreams. So this is, yeah, it's all really good. And Meia also has worked with us like as one of our partners in the project, actually, in terms of co-creation and developing many of the activities together with the partners. Yep.
All right. So I think this is something for all of you, and I leave it to one of you to pick up the first answer. But of course, if we're talking about co-creation, there's a risk of uncertainty, right? So if you are involving people in your development process, there is things that you can't account for. So how have you been dealing with that in your project? Maybe Kristen?
Yes, I'd be happy to take that. Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, our 6th action neighborhoods really started almost entirely with a blank slate. It was truly co-creative from the bottom up. We didn't know exactly for each neighborhood what exactly would be implemented, if residents would even get engaged, if conflicts could be resolved, these sorts of things. So anything could have happened. It was really exciting on the one hand, but also a bit risky. And yeah, it's, well, that also adds to excitement, I guess. So yeah, basically what we did, luckily we had the time to sort of experiment, to go through this very iterative process, because it's not entirely linear. Although I mentioned these 4 phases of co-creation, it's not like we started in one box, moved directly on to the next. There was some overlap, there was some backtracking for some measures. So it took quite a bit of time, and we identified a number of risks. What we did was we set up a risk horizon scanning tool. So we already anticipated a number of risks, around 15 of them at the beginning of the project, and continued adding to them, as well as mitigation measures. So what we tried to do was set up some structures and some agreements among the partners at the local level, but also in the consortium, so we can support each other. We have our technical support partners, which have been supporting the neighborhoods when they ran into any issues, if they needed some help with design or communication outreach. And we also had each action neighborhood set up these co-creation forums, which I mentioned, so that there would be a representative from each of the areas or different groups in the neighborhood, so representing local businesses and community organizations. And this has worked really well. And actually some of our risks, when it came to, for example, funding, were actually just not a risk at all. And the successes at the neighborhood level have actually convinced the city and the national level in some action neighborhoods to fund co-creative processes more widely. So that's been a great outcome. But definitely I can say one of the biggest challenges that we've had is co-evaluation. We anticipated being able to assess impacts, very concrete quantitative impacts. But I can say that there's quite a lot to be learned about the qualitative impacts, the co-creation process itself, the impacts of that process on cross-departmental cooperation and these sorts of things. So the challenges continue. It's not not all risks have been mitigated, but we're learning.
Nothing. All right. Any of the other parts want to add to this?
Yeah, when it comes to challenges for us, it was mainly the involvement of children made the challenge that we had go for an ethical approval procedure in every country, and this is different from country to country, and this was not easy to get. And so this was in the beginning a lot of work to put the things together in that way that the ethical bodies gave us the approvals when working out the activities. So this was a lot of work, but it paid off. So it was, next time we know it better, and we can give some recommendations out of our project activities, how to take this barrier.
Yeah. So what would be the sort of the biggest aha moment that you had, Carl, in the project? Sort of working with children is a sort of a new approach, of course. And so what was sort of your moment of enlightenment that you thought, oh, this is something new, this is something that we can give to other projects?
This was an interesting moment because it was a barrier to deal with this new work package on ethical issues, which we got in the negotiations. And that, but we answered in that way that we worked together with schools, kindergartens, and youth organizations who had already some things in place related to these ethical issues, and this was a success factor. In the end, it was completely successful because we implemented more than 700 implementations, interventions, condensed to 70 fact sheets. So,
and these things were all co-created with children.
Exactly.
Yes.
So this was our focus. We didn't do anything without children. Yeah.
So if we're looking at the ideas that sort of in this case children, but in the other projects also a broader age groups, of course, more also intergenerational groups. If we invite people to think along with us, there is of course also a risk that you might disappoint people, or that you have to select things that might not meet all the ideas that both from a governmental perspective are attainable, or from a social point attainable. Imre, how are you dealing with selecting ideas that are feasible, and how are you sort of making sure that these are not blocked by other stakeholders or other entities?
Indeed, in our process as well, the citizens came up with many brilliant ideas. At one point, I think for the intervention in Brussels, we had over 40 ideas to improve traffic safety in a neighborhood. And eventually we needed to consolidate these ideas, and also, yeah, we didn't have the resources to implement all of the great ideas. So in our project, we also looked at ways how we can actually evaluate the potential impact of the co-designed ideas. And for that, we combine this very creative, maybe a little fuzzy co-creation process with a more structured approach based on multi-criteria analysis and also the multi-actor multi-criteria analysis, which can appraise these ideas from the point of view of sustainability, because actually the citizens might also come up with ideas which are not so sustainable environmentally or socially, and also to show if there are any conflicts between the different stakeholders who might be involved in the implementation or might be affected by these projects. Which also points us to the findings that we should look also beyond just citizens and also consider the wider array of stakeholders who are important, such as the public transport operators, the businesses in the neighborhood, even the street cleaning company, the schools. Because we might have the most brilliant idea selected for a specific street, but if it, let's say, is disadvantageous for the local businesses, then you end up with a conflict, and which might actually block the implementation.
Yeah, so there's still, of course, you're involving people, but there's also things sort of you're in a process that you're moving on. So Isabel, how are you able to keep people in the loop of your process, and how are you keep them involved in and also make sure that people still feel being heard in that sense?
Well, I think we can't underestimate the role of communication in these projects. It's something that even though like every time every project starts, like you set up, like there is a website and everything, but again, identifying which means of communications will be more effective in different places, because maybe some types of social media are effective in some places while others, you know, like prefer a different type of media and so on. And also knowing that by having the choice of media would also determine the target groups. So which groups you're like reaching, right? I mean, so this is, I think it's very important. So the role of communication cannot be underestimated. So that's one thing. And so what we did in the project was, it's kind of a balance between having a lot of like enough events and at the same time not, you know, at the same time not too many. So it's, yeah, so it's kind of this, you have to find this balance between these two aspects, but in that's kind of, I think, how we kind of kept in the project of social newsletters and so on. But definitely like I could see, for example, that in Hamburg, Twitter was very, very popular, and they used that to like to gather and to, you know, to let people know about the project, while in other places like Facebook or WhatsApp was like most used. So that depends on the location, but definitely the role of communication is very important to keep people in the loop and make sure that they are, I mean, and also the fact that you follow up from the last time, so they can see that they can also see that they have been heard, right? That they, like what they said has been heard and has been taken into the next round.
Yeah. So for all of the projects, I think pilots were sort of the operational entity to test out an experiment with the co-creative approach in the context of a mobility issues, or in the case of Loop, or a slightly broader area to work with, but certainly in the context of a city. And how are we dealing with the city, and how can we make sure that the people living in the city are part of the solution in that sense? So this is actually a question to all of you. sort of what is the biggest result that you would attribute to your project? Take the floor, whatever you want. Carl, maybe you can start it off.
I would maybe give an answer in a bit other direction, because what would be good, or what we expect from the European Union to, like, let's say, to make good frame conditions for neighborhood mobility, and this is very much connected with the available space. And the available street space is usually blocked by parked cars. And in a lot of road codes of the countries, this is a privilege for car users to put their machines there. And if we would have some guidance from the European Union to improve the national road codes and make this space available for everybody, accessible for everybody, especially for people, for families, or somebody who would like to have also some part of the street space, even without owning a car. This would be a real good, let's say, next step to do that and to guide the national bodies to change the road code in this access. And then we have good conditions for changing the space, for changing the space from dead motorist space to living space. I would say this is the most strong thing which could be changed. And we see there is a need for that.
Yeah, so that's sort of based on the work that you've done in the project that you came across. Yeah. Kristen, could you give us sort of an idea of what sort of the biggest results are? Of course, your project is still going.
Yeah.
But so far, what would be the sort of the biggest results of what you achieved so far?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say, following on from the topic of communication, which Isabel was talking about, sort of the way that this process has facilitated trust at the neighborhood level among residents. I'd say, yeah, that's one of the main messages, or one of the most inspiring things coming out of our Action Neighborhoods, is this sense of trust among the residents, engagement, and that we can see that this process is very, I mean, it's useful. It's something that other neighborhoods now want to take up. So, for example, in Jerusalem, another neighborhood, actually a predominantly Muslim neighborhood, is going to take up this idea that we're doing in Baca, in the Baca neighborhood of Jerusalem. Also in Bremen, other neighborhoods will be taking up the co-creative approach at the neighborhood level. So I would say this speaks to the benefits of co-creation. It's not a traditional approach that I think a lot of people are familiar with, and but the results speak for themselves when you do dare to undergo this process. And we hope that also one of the key outputs from Sunrise now, we're working on this document now, is Sustainable Neighborhood Mobility Planning, so SNMP, and to see how it can be complementary with SUMP, so the wider city level planning. But that's still to come. Yeah.
Great. And Isabel, could you talk about what Cities for People has achieved so far, and how we're taking that to the next stages, or a new project, or a new area?
Yeah, well, without thinking, I mean, yeah, following up, I mean, this is exactly I mean, I think the fact that co-creation allows for agency, for local agency of citizens, you know, for this kind of participation, and even these perspectives that, you know, that people had like they had different knowledges from the neighborhood, you know, different depending on what your stake, you know, the kind of stake you have in the neighborhood, you have a different perspective. So this learning and these discussions and this moment of people to gain these different perspectives and to work through these perspectives, you know, and for people to see their results out installed, you know, and tried out in the street. That's definitely, like, without any doubt, like a big aspect. I mean, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, the fact that some of these solutions that have been implemented, the fact that they have become permanent, you know, I mean, the fact that they went from prototyping to scale up to, you know, they will continue to be there. That's definitely like an amazing result. But also the fact that this process can be replicated in other places as well, and that can be, contextualized to other neighborhoods. So, for example, I've been in talks with Rio, you know, and with my old university actually. But there is like an interest of like also looking at this project as a process for maybe like, you know, PhD thesis or something, then try out this project in like an association neighborhood, like again, neighborhood, but within a certain group. So there are, I think, many possibilities. So I definitely, the other outcome I would say is exactly the process, is the fact that we can replicate this process to, you know, to different contexts, and then bring it out.
All right, and then Imre, to finish up this question, what is sort of the biggest results in maybe your personal takeaways also from the Looper project?
Well, as Isabel said, in our project as well, learning was a key aspect. And we have demonstrated that the co-creation actually works. We implemented it in multiple cycles. It can lead to concrete results. Of course, in such a project, very often these results are temporary, but I think there is a more permanent takeaway, and this is the learning that happened within the community, because the citizens experience that, yes, they can be empowered, they can use different digital, non-digital tools to express what they need, and also to creatively contribute to the solutions. And the same thing is true for policymakers, and especially when the policymakers and the citizens met each other. And as Christine said, this trust developed also across the different tiers of the actors and society. And by the end of the day, we hope that in the future, the citizens, when they have an initiative and they experience problems, then they will reach out to the co-creation tools that we created, but also that will be true for the policymakers. And by the end of the day, it was very nice to see the enthusiasm on the faces of the participants, and also the smiles that they could contribute to the improvement of their own environments.
All right. So we can, of course, maybe fill the entire conference talking about our 4 projects. Of course, if this were a conference of just one project, then we should have more time for one project. But there's, of course, a reason that we joined forces with these 4 projects. And that is because, of course, there are differences, but we also found validation in each other's work, and that we can actually pool our knowledge and create sort of a set of recommendations following these 4 projects. So that resulted in what we call the big messages from these 4 projects. So together with these 4 projects, we set up an overview of these 10 big messages that would have recommendations underneath them. So these are all validated with both, of course, in each other's projects, but also in a more general research. But of course, we wanted to invite this people that joined this conference to actually look at these big messages and discuss them with us, and share your insights, your experiences, to even fine-tune these big messages a little bit more, and maybe also be critical about them. That's also, of course, something that you need to continue to be doing, so that in the end We have a co-created set of messages that would, for one, help next generation projects, people on a local level and both on a European level to set up new projects in co-creative way, learning from our experience and learning from your experience. So that is the idea of the breakout sessions that we're about to jump into. Of course, normally we would have breakout sessions and we would sit around flip over papers, start doing some co-creative exercises, maybe even work with Lego. Unfortunately, that's not possible today. So we're all sort of dealing with the long distancing and hopefully we are able to really share our ideas and our knowledge in the breakout sessions. I read that I've heard from our organization that the breakout sessions are now ready, so everybody is indeed assigned to their groups. There's a you will get your instructions in your breakout room from the moderators there, but just be aware that there is a hard out in this sense. So after the 60 minutes are gone, you are reverted to back to this main this plenary session, so that we can all sort of pool our thoughts together and hopefully come to some nice insights, and hopefully you all had nice discussions in your breakouts. Of course, you are assigned to a certain topic, but everything is connected. So also feel free to add your thoughts to other things if you want to share them. In the meantime, in the chat, there is a lot of things shared about the project. It's clear that there's so much more to be said about each of the projects and what has been done in the project. So the links to each of our 4 projects has been shared in the chat. But we, at the end of the conference, we will also share some of the tools and